earlier this week, we had a conversation about a story that was published in the Standard. It was taken from the Economic Survey that was released by the National Treasury, CS, Ukuriatani, last week. It talked about our food production, our food consumption. Now, it was looking at the various food items, from potatoes to beans to tomatoes to vegetables to maize, the staple, to rice, to other grains as well. And in each of these categories, there's X amount of kilos or tons produced per year, and then there's X amount consumed, and the difference is lost somewhere. So there's some losses that's taking place in the value chain, and we started from farm. At what point are we starting to encounter the losses? Once you've harvested, some of the food is basically lost at farm level. Others now starts getting lost as you transport it to the market. Other losses take place at the market. Other losses then take place from market on the way to home. Other losses take place at home because of handling and storage. So there's a lot of loss that's taking place in the entire value chain, but a lot of it is taking place from farm to market, that distance there. We had a conversation with the scientist Mwalimu from Isipe, remember? And he's telling about the post-harvest of mangoes, post-harvest losses for mangoes, especially coming from the Ukambani region, and what they've done, the work that they've done there to see how can we minimize the post-harvest losses, or just basically the losses, in terms of seeing, though, this is a mango fruit. By the time this is getting to the market, it is invaded by various things. How do we reduce this invasion? What is this that's causing it? How can we make sure that the farmer, if you produce 100 mangoes, you take to the market 100 mangoes. He was telling us previously, farmers would produce 100 mangoes, they take to the market 20. The rest, somewhere there in between, all gone to waste. Let's bring in some experts to help us discuss this particular matter. One of them is an expert on issues of post-harvest losses. She's a specialist on this at the University of Nairobi, Professor Jen Ambuko. And then the other one is a coordinator for the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program. It's called CAADP. It's a program by the African Union Commission. He's Komla Bissi. They join us on the line. Professor, very good morning to you, Professor Ambuko.
Good morning.
It's good to have you in the Situation Room.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us, I think you're in Ghana. This is Komla Bissi. Good morning, Komla.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for having me on your show this morning, and greetings from Accra, Ghana.
Thank you. Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation, Komla Bissi. Now, let me start with you, Professor. Post-harvest losses, I'm sure you saw the story in the papers the other day in the Standard. You've been dealing with post-harvest issues. So the reason I'm saying I'm sure is because when you see post-harvest, wherever it will be, obviously you'll stop to read again. This was derived from figures from the government itself in the Economic Survey, which was showing how much losses we're encountering from beans to vegetables to any grain and cereal, all types of food. What causes these losses in Kenya? You've been dealing with this for a while.
Okay, so it actually depends on the commodity. The way you have said, the losses really vary with the value chain. Yeah. So that survey, or from the report that was published in Monday, which a lot of this we borrow from FAO publications. We're talking about, for example, in grains like maize, we're talking about 10 to 20%. In fruits and vegetables, we're talking about 40 to 50%. In tubers, fruits and tubers, we're talking about 20%, like that. So really, the causes, or what we call the drivers of these losses, vary. Yeah, and I had you at the beginning talk about food loss and food waste. Yes. Yep. So again, you need to understand what is food loss. So she said, there's what happens from the time the food is harvested all the way until it reaches the retail stage.
Yep.
So that is what we call food loss. And the factors or the drivers that cause this are many. It could be like what you had from the, the people what we told you. There's a lot has to do with how, for example, for perishable produce like fruits and vegetables, it's how is the harvesting done. I don't know if you've ever witnessed, harvesting, say, of mangoes or avocado sometimes in the machinery in the village. You find sometimes, until now, when we are trying to train people about the importance of good harvest practices, you find somebody climbs in the tree and, they harvest that fruit and they throw it down, and then they gather them into, say, a crate or a sack or something like that. You have already inflicted injury on that fruit. I don't know if you've ever bought a nice looking mango or avocado and you kept it in your house, and then when it ripens, you cut and you find it's bad.
Yep.
That injury, you're seeing it in your kitchen, but it started from the field, So if you think about it like that, so the drivers, the causes of the losses really vary with the commodity. If you're talking about the grains, it's a different storage. When they are harvested, how are they dried before storage? Sometimes, they are dried, but they never dried properly to the moisture content that is required, which is like 13%. So you find sometimes the grains are stored when they're not properly dried. So therein you find that they start to accumulate aflatoxins. But also, again, if they're not stored properly, I don't know if you know of this storage pest that is called Osama.
Osama?
Yeah? Osama. It's the storage pest. You check the grain, it's stored. But then you find that if you go check the storage bag, let's say after some time, if the weevils are in the storage area, you find that the maize is actually has holes or is basically flat in course. So that is now storage, poor storage. So many things, many drivers contribute to this process. It's the practices, it's storage, the fruits and vegetables, it's lack of cold storage at the farm level, lack of capacity to do value addition at the upstream, down there. Many factors, it is case by case. If you pick one, each one of them has its own driver. Even managing pests in the field, for example, could be is a driver for losses. Because, for example, I don't know if you can get a fruit that is very good looking like mango. Mango is my favorite fruit. But then you cut it inside when it's ripened, you find it has a weevil. For example, that weevil in mango, for example, is the reason we even have lost market for our fruits to the European Union. So the drivers of losses are many, and it depends actually on the commodity. Yeah.
Professor, I am enthralled by what I'm hearing. And I can, even as you're speaking, I can actually picture, especially this one of mangoes, because I've actually seen mangoes being harvested. And it's interesting, they actually dropped. Somebody climbs the trees and sort of just drops them onto the ground. And it had never occurred to me until you mentioned the word injury. But the thing I want you to tell us, at least to talk to us about, is when you talk about FAO and organizations that have to do, whose main function is food security, how do they go about collecting the data that informs us about these issues that we are now talking about? What processes do they use?
Yeah, so basically, FAO does not necessarily collect data. You see, we need to have our own data. Actually, they depend on country reports. So one of the things I can tell you we have a challenge of is data. Even the figures that we are quoting right now, there's what was published in the report, and there's what is published in international reports, and most of the reports that we quote are FAO reports, because there's a question of reliability of data. Because for you to collect data that is reliable, you must use the right tools for collecting that data. So I can tell you for a fact, one of the challenges we have in addressing the problem of food loss and waste is lack of data, reliable data, right? So what we quote are estimates, yes, which have been done and sometimes questionable because of the methodology that has been used to collect that data. My colleague Komla here, he will tell you when the reporting, because African countries and globally we have set targets for reducing food loss and waste. At the African level, at the Africa continental level, we have set targets to have the post-harvest losses by the year 2025. So they are being monitored. Countries are being monitored every 2 years to check the progress towards meeting the set targets. And I can tell you, most of the countries in Africa, including Kenya, we actually not on track. I don't want to, Komla will tell you much about this. And the reason of this, for example, in Kenya, we do not have data to report.
Wow.
So let's start there. Who is this data? Who needs to collect that data? Who's going to fund collection of that data? Because we cannot continue using estimates to make decisions.
Maybe it's a good time to ask that question and to you, Komla, is that do we have an understanding generally across the board then of some of these, the causes of some of this loss that a professor has talked about? Do we have a complete understanding of the reasons as to why these losses are taking place? And then the requisite action to be able to mitigate or reduce significantly the loss that is being faced?
Thank you once again. Yes, I must mention first of all that the problem of food loss and waste, and for that matter, post-harvest loss reduction, is a global phenomenon. It's not a problem that is limited to our continent alone. And for that matter, globally, there is consensus, even under the Sustainable Development Goals, to reduce global food loss and food waste. For us in Africa, absolutely, what matters to us is post-harvest losses. Basically, yes, not only at the farm level, but across the value chain. Yes, I can assure you that there is a global understanding that we lose about a third of our food that is produced for human consumption. There is every understanding on that. There is every evidence on the continent to prove that. However, how we define intervention to be able to address these challenges along the value chain is why we are here today. This is why we, the Congress, which we call the All Africa Post-Harvest Congress and Exhibition, to help us to bring together our stakeholders, everybody, not only within the continent, but across the globe, to discuss this pertinent issue and to come up with solutions to address the issues of post-harvest losses on the continent. Yes, so we have an understanding of where the losses are. We have an understanding of the causes, and our effort now is to come together to address this challenge.
Are these losses that we're seeing, because we're looking at huge numbers now? I'm looking at the numbers that, for example, came out in this economic survey in Kenya as an example. And if I just take maize, we're looking at 88 million kilograms of maize having been lost. Now, I guess we're going to deal with the definitions of loss and wastage, but all right, not available, that could have been available. Are these losses, I think it's important, are these losses avoidable? And what would be the measure to which you say this loss then is acceptable?
Yes, food loss, for that matter, post-harvest loss, can not totally be eliminated, but it can be reduced. And to a large extent, control of avoided. This is why there is need to understand where the losses are and what sort of mitigating measures we need to put in place to be able to reduce the loss. I mean, there are some of the losses that are due to mechanical issues, processing issues, lack of appropriate storage facilities, etc. Prof. Ambuko will allude to some of those technical aspects. Some of them, yes, we require appropriate technology, appropriate storage systems, appropriate processing facilities, etc., to be able to reduce the losses along the value chain. So depending on where on the value chain the losses are, that will determine the kind of intervention that will be required.
Thank you, Prof. Let's take a break at this point and then we continue the conversation after this break. We are discussing post-harvest loss reduction, how we can have sustainable food systems in our country and across the continent. So Komla Bissi is a coordinator of Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program at the African Union Commission. And Professor Jane Ambuko is a post-harvest specialist at the University of Nairobi. The two are joining us via video link. We are live on SpiceFM, on KTN Home and online, 27 minutes after 8. Keep it right here. We'll be back shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. 24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is SpiceFM.
Gone are the days when hiring should be about hitting the brick wall, because we understand how much it means to have the ideal candidate working for you and your organization. That's why at Standard Jobs website, we offer the complete employer dashboard that lets you interact fully with applicants, lets you track the full hiring process through a qualified specific smart search tool. What's more, we offer a full-on custom branded page that lets your company stand out with your own to choose custom page. So visit www.standardmedia.co.ke/jobs today and let's help you find the next ideal candidate for you.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise.
You're listening to Spice FM.
19, highs of 14 and rather highs of 25 and lows of 14. We'll see partly sunny conditions in Nakuru, highs of 24 and lows of 13. The high will be 23 in Nyeri, where it's cloudy at 16. That'll come down to lows of 14. All right, taking a look into Eldoret, partly sunny conditions at 16. We'll see 12 at Solo and highs of 23. In Kisumu this morning, it's mostly cloudy at 21, highs of 28 and lows of 18. Kakamega is cloudy at 21. We'll see lows of 14 and highs of 25. In Mombasa, it continues to rain at 24.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room on Spice FM, KTN Home and online. In the room is Eric Latif, Ndu Oko and C.T. Muga. Joining us on the line is Professor Jane Ambuko. She's a post-harvest specialist at the University of Nairobi, and Komla Bissi, coordinator, Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program at the AU Commission, talking about post-harvest loss reduction, making sure that we can have sustainable food systems in the country. City.
Professor Ambuko, my curiosity has been, should we say, heightened even more by what I heard you say regarding not just our data collection, but the data that we have on our food security. You said if I heard you correctly, of course, you mentioned that some of the data we have, we arrive at by estimates. I heard the word estimate. Now, I want us to imagine an ideal situation where we have funding for research and we have the wherewithal. How would we go about collecting this data? What would we do?
So, for starters, I can tell you, like you said, I mentioned at the beginning, there's a data that we have been posting since 2011, which is 30% of food is lost. 1.3 billion tons of food is lost. That is data that we've been posting. And I think the fact that data has been posted without any variation over the last more than 10 years, that is the reason why, because what I know is that people have been collecting data. Because if you don't, in research, you say the data has to be replicable. And for you to replicate my research or my data, we must use a common methodology. We must have a common understanding of what we are measuring. So we have to start from there. What if you have, even I had you say that the food loss and food waste. Those are two different things. What is food loss? What is your understanding of food loss? What is food waste? Well, until we have a common understanding and have common, tools that are harmonized, so that if Komla collects data and I collect data in maize, and I say the losses in maize at the farm level is 2%. The data that is collected by Komla should also be 2% within an acceptable margin of error. But I can tell you today, if Komla decides to go and collect data, let's say pick a place in Kakamega, go and collect data on losses in maize, and then I also go a week later, same figure, without just using the same tool, I'll probably, Komla might, depending on how he did it, he'll come and say, you know what, the losses of maize in Kakamega is 30%. I will go with my tool and I come and say, losses of maize in Kakamega is 10%. It is the tool, they are not the same, and we don't have a common understanding of what loss is or what waste is. So we start from there. We need, and this is part of what we've been doing and what the FA is doing and what the African Union Commission is doing. Let us have a common understanding of what loss is. Let us have common, or rather harmonized tools that we can use to collect this data so that it's reliable, it's replicable, and this data that can be spotted, it can actually, because the data we have, they can do a study and extrapolate. You cannot, if you extrapolate wrong data, what you have extrapolated is wrong. So that is where the problem is. We do not have, somebody has to take, and this is one thing we have recommended. Let us identify priority value chain. In Kenya, if we decide maize is a priority value, like Komla said, the causes of losses at each stage are varying. So we must go, for example, what is the extent of losses at the farm level, for example, and what are the drivers of losses at the farm level? Move to the next step. Is it the market stage or the transport stage? What is the extent of the losses? And what are the drivers of the losses during transport? Only then can we make a targeted intervention that will then contribute to the reduction of the losses. But if we don't understand, we don't have we just make blanket assumption that the losses in maize is 10%. And remember, I forgot to mention, even when we talk about losses in maize, there's what we call quantitative losses, which you can measure and quantify. But we also have what we call qualitative losses. If in Kenya, you know, we have thrown maize, or maize has been declared unfit for human consumption. That is qualitative losses. We haven't even gone there when you're talking about post-harvest losses.
Prof, it sounds like we have an academic disagreement at policy and research level on some of the basic things. How can we be at this point? I mean, we have a government, we have policy, we've got implementers, and then we've got the academia that supports this. But we just cannot understand one another on the definition of what is loss.
It's not just academia and policy, but you see, that is what I said. It is just like today, many people use these terms interchangeably. Some people use food loss and food waste, but they have come up to clarify that so that we have a common understanding.
How long is
food
it
loss
going?
is what happens until the retail stage, and then whatever happens between retail and your kitchen, which is deliberate. Actually, food waste is when food that is fit for human consumption is discarded deliberately.
How long
So
is
you
it
go
going
to
to
your kitchen
take?
today.
If I can ask, Prof, how
Yes.
long is it going to take to attain this understanding? Because as we are seeking to understand, there are certain things that are happening at the moment. And I guess you could jump in here, Komla, as well. There are certain things that are happening at the moment. There's a famine in Kenya, for example, right now. There's drought. There are people who are not able to access food because the rains have not come. And at the same time, we are talking about loss in the millions of kilograms that could have mitigated those circumstances today. Kenya is not the only country on the continent that's suffering from this right now. So if we're talking about the need to understand when things are happening at the moment that we need mitigation for, how long is this going to take?
Okay, I know Komla is going to jump in, but I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying is not even about understanding, because the previous, you asked about the fact that data is not there. Because today, if I'm going to make a case for, go to the Minister of Agriculture or the PS for Agriculture and say, you know what, we need to intervene, and I say, I have to quantify the problem. Because for us to even know that this needs intervention, this needs budget allocation, like really money that would address the problem. We have to justify, and that's why they say if you cannot quantify and know what does it mean, monetary terms, how much. I know FAO has done a lot of work to actually quantify the losses in terms of the money that is lost, the water that is used to produce food that goes to waste, the greenhouse gases that is emitted from waste and all that. You see, that has to come from data, so that as we try to influence policy, we know that in fact this is a problem. Because remember, we're talking about sustainable food system. Even if we are talking about like right now, I know yesterday there was I saw the on KTN yesterday, the farmers in Kinangop have potatoes. They're stuck with potatoes there. Why? Because the traders have refused to come for these potatoes. What is the problem there? What is the problem there? You see, this potato is a very highly perishable food commodity. If they do not sell it after harvest, it's going to go to waste.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah. So, if you were to help those farmers in Kinangop until that problem with the standard of traders addressed, they need storage. At the farm, they don't have cold storage. Yeah. So, if those potatoes don't go to the market, they'll go to waste. So, that's why we have to understand what are the drivers of the losses. At the farm level, we're talking about lack of storage. For perishable, we're talking about cold storage. We're talking about for the non-perishable commodities like grain, we're talking about dry chain, having, whether they're storage bags or you're having silos or the good storage environment so that we keep off the pests and we keep off, the factors that cause spoiling at the farm level.
Mm-hmm. And for you, Komla, where do you feel that, or what, in terms of action that needs to be taken, where do you feel that the boots need to be on the ground right now?
Yes, absolutely. We cannot continue to discuss food security for our people without making conscious effort to reduce the wastage that are along the value chain. At the African Union level, I must mention that our government understood the need to reduce post-harvest losses, for that matter, food loss and waste on the continent. In that context, in the year 2014, our government, including the government of Kenya, was part of it, committed to put in place measures that will help to reduce post-harvest losses at least by half from the current levels that we have by the year 2025. This is a commitment every government has made at the African Union level. Now, what is needed is to translate this commitment into practical operational mechanisms in terms of programs, in terms of strategy. And this is what Dr. Ambuko mentioned earlier. Therefore, we need to understand where the losses are within the value chains in Kenya. For example, we were discussing mangoes earlier. It is up to the honorable people of Kenya to help us to understand where the losses are. Is it during harvesting of these mangoes? Is it during transportation? Is it the fact that we don't have sufficient processing units or storage systems? And then we will all collectively be able to define what kind of interventions are required to be able to mitigate these losses. So, therefore, I must mention that there's a global commitment. Our governments are committed to this process. There are policy commitments to this. What needs to be done is to put all these commitments into practical implementation action, ensure that these commitments are mainstreamed into our own national strategic planning processes in a way that they can be prioritized and interventions can be tailored around where there is a need.
Komla, there's something I need to understand. I mean, when, say, for instance, as you mentioned, that a commitment has been made at the AU by, say, countries, okay, commitment is made, and then ideally they should go back and ensure that they implement these commitments. Is there any way in which the AU can actually hold them accountable? Is there any way in which the AU can ensure that they actually live up to their words?
Absolutely. We are one people, and when we make commitments, we must ensure that we stick to them. At the AU level, in fact, in the context of agriculture, what we have done at the AU level is to define a reporting mechanism that our government report back every 2 years on the progress that they're making on achieving the targets that have been set in the context of the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, one of which is to ensure that post-harvest losses are reduced by half by 2025. And therefore, we require countries to report back on the progress that they are making. As we speak, we're just about to finalize the report for 2020 and 2021, which will be presented to our own head of state in January 2022. During this event, countries that are on track of meeting the commitment of reducing post-harvest loss by 50% will be recognized. I think that is sufficient to recognize countries that are doing well and encourage countries that need to improve with respect to meeting the commitment. So yes, the African Union has put in place this mechanism to be able to appreciate our government where they are doing well and also to encourage our government where they need to improve with respect to their performance in relation to the commitments that we have made for ourselves.
Komla, can you give us some case studies of some countries in Africa that are doing well in reduction of post-harvest loss?
Yes, it's a common knowledge that, for example, in our review of the 2018-2019 biannual review report, I must recognize that the country, Uganda, was the country that performed best with respect to achieving the targets on post-harvest loss reduction. Other countries are also doing extremely well. Rwanda, for example, Kenya. But when we profile the countries according to the data that we had, Uganda was the best performing country.
What is it that they've done? What have they done to realize such improvement?
Well, this may relate to the policies with respect to ensuring that there is inclusive arrangement with respect to food loss and post-harvest loss reduction. It will relate to their own national strategy. And I must mention that some countries, even though they're doing a lot, they do not have the data. We mentioned data already. I think one thing that came clear in this process was that countries were not reporting because they do not have the data collection system. They do not have the appropriate systems that allow them to evidently gather data and report. So many countries that have not featured as being on track in this process may not necessarily mean that things are not happening on the ground, but only the fact that because we can only know how a country is doing when they report, when they give us the information. But when they don't give us the information, we're not able to profile them and be able to assess them. And this is one thing that we discussing with our government to explore options of strengthening data collecting systems, not only for food loss and waste reduction, but across the various value chains, not only also only for agriculture, but the other sectors, so that we can be able to use this data, analyze it, be able to guide our government to make informed decisions on where exactly investment should be going, where intervention should be going, etc. And this is one role also that we see our academic institutions such as the universities to help us to be able to strengthen our data collection system. So I will evidently on this platform blame it more on data, availability of data than availability of strategies, etc. On this note.
Is there actual implementation, Komla? You run the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program of the AU Commission. What you do at the CADP, does it actually get implemented? The advice that you give various governments, is it actually taken up and implemented by those governments? Can you say that we told government X, this is a way to go for the next 3 to 5 years, and they actually implemented it 80% of your recommendations?
Yes, it will be unfair to say that our governments are not implementing the commitments that we have made. But I must also recognize that the level of implementation varies from country to country. And this is one area that we continue to work with our government to ensure that they remain on track with respect to implementing this commitment.
On average, Komla, in terms of averages, are they implementing 30%, 40%, 2% on average?
On average, I will give our continent at least 80% of compliance with respect to implementing this commitment, because in the last Ghana review report that we've had, at least more than, I think, 49 countries reported, which shows that there is a huge element of commitment to the process, and that needs to be recognized. Yet few countries could not participate because of various reasons, conflict, whatever. You know the situation already on the continent. But now coming back to the post-harvest loss reduction. Thereafter, when the commitment of reducing post-harvest losses by 50% by 2025 was made, at the African Union level, we've gone ahead to develop a continental strategy which provides strategic direction to guide countries to understand what needs to be done with respect to policies, investment, etc., to be able to achieve the target. And the next step was to help countries to develop country-specific strategies. And I must mention that the government of Kenya committed to this process, and they developed the national post-harvest loss reduction strategy. So we cannot say that there is no commitment. From the African Union level, we recognize that. Now, what the honorable people of Kenya need to do now is to take that country strategy that they've developed and then mainstream the actions into the National Agriculture Program Implementation Arrangement so that they can be prioritized, so that every partner will align their interventions to these strategic areas that the people of Kenya have defined as their priority and get them implemented. Right. So, yes, there is commitment. Our government continues to show this commitment. at various levels, but we all have to mobilize ourselves. All partners have to come on board to support our governments to be able to implement this commitment the way they have been defined.
Actually, I concede that as you work for the AU, there are details of what is done in terms of fulfilling commitments that you would know that we don't. But I don't share your enthusiasm or belief, because if I'm to go by something that is key and fundamental to every living being, the health issues around the continent, the Abuja Declaration, 2001, 10 years down the line, we only saw, that is in 2011, only 2 countries were able to meet that 15% commitment that had been made. The others were still scratching their backs and thinking about it. To date, as we speak, even this country of ours, Kenya, that 15% that we speak about is something we still speak about. So when it comes to agriculture, unfortunately, my despair has to be ushered in that direction as well. And I fear that commitments will be made, but as for the implementations,
have faith, City. Have faith. We live on faith. Okay? We live on faith. We conclude. Talk about that conference, the All Africa Post-Harvest Conference and Exhibition that's coming up. When is it taking place?
It is not when, it is already on.
Yes.
Actually, yes. Actually, the conference started on Monday. And, so it's actually today is the final day of the conference. And our chief here, Mr. Komla, Bissi, will be, speaking in one of the plenary sessions. So, and like you said, for us, this platform, actually we started this in 2017, when we held the Park Congress at Safari Park, partnership between University of Nairobi and supported by Rockefeller Foundation, working with at that time the African Union had not come on board, but then they took it over in 2019. So this Congress this year is the 3rd phase of it. And the purpose of this Congress, this year's Congress, the theme is post-harvest loss reduction for sustainable food system. And you will find that as we have various topics that will be discussed, and we're looking at, again, the issue of data is one of the key things that is coming out. Like we said, Kenya, for example, is seen not to be on track, not because they're not doing anything, but because we do not have data to report. So that is something that we're really pushing, that governments have to invest in data systems so that we collect data on food loss and waste and be able to report action, so that come 2025, which is barely 3-4 years away, those targets that were set of halving losses by the year 2025, we have something to report. So data is among the key topics we're discussing, but most importantly, we are looking at the solutions in the African context. So people are talking about sustainable solutions to food loss and waste. We're talking about storage technologies. We're talking about ICTs in post-harvest. We're talking about, there's a lot that is, policies and strategies that are working. The panel that Komla will be sitting on this afternoon will be looking at countries that are on track. What is it that they're doing right, so that the other countries can emulate? Because ultimately, when we lose food, like we said earlier, it's not just food we're losing. We are impacting negatively
on livelihoods and lives. Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Jane Ambuko is a post-harvest specialist at the University of Nairobi, and Komla Bissi is a coordinator of Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program at the AU Commission. Asante sana for joining us.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.